this decision by Shenhar to play this deck. Again, 2 of those in the top 8 last weekend.
Yes, although unlike the builds that we saw in the elimination rounds, Shahar playing a list much closer to the one that I was working on for a while, playing main deck Painseer.
I don't see that very often.
No, I'm a fan of the card. It's a little slow, but it is very powerful in certain spots. Combos very well with Mogus Marauder, and is a very powerful opening behind a turn 1 Thoughtseize, which Shahar is playing 4 copies of in his main deck.
Kyle Hutchens is the opponent, and he is playing Jund Monsters. Nothing too crazy going on here. I guess the thing that's, I suppose, most out of the ordinary, just 2 copies of Ultimate Price in the main deck, which will be good here. Had those been Doomblades, not so good, but you got to like how that card lines up in this matchup.
A bit of a flex slot here. We've seen this slot be taken up by Abrupt Decay over the last couple of weeks. That's become very common in Jund Monsters. But perhaps after Jim Davis's top 4 with the blue-white control deck that was definitely built with beating Abrupt Decay in mind, Kyle decided to go with a little bit more of a reliable removal spell in Ultimate Price.
You speak of the Planner Cleansing blue-white control deck that Jim Davis did play to the top 4 last weekend before being dispatched by Miriam. Some big-name players, Huey Jensen, Reduke playing that deck this weekend. So we'll keep our eyes out on that, but we turn our attention here to Shenhar leading off with a Rakdos Cackler here in round 1 of 16 of our Season 2 Invitational.
And one of the big reasons for Mono Black Devotion to now be, or Mono Black Aggro rather, to be a deck now, 12 2-power 1-drops to choose from. Rakdos Cackler, of course, Tormented Hero, and Gnarled Skyhide. In
for 2 comes Shenhar. Hutchens going to go down to 18. We'll see what the follow-up is going to be. It'll be a Thoughtseize. Time to take a look at the grip. A Stomping Ground. You see a Domri. There's also a Dreadbore. Let's make it 2 Domris, 2 Stormbreath Dragons, and a copy of Pool of Chronos. A very slow start here for Hutchens.
This is a rough hand. He can't cast his removal spell on turn 2. There's no guarantee that he can even cast Domri on turn 3, and he has nothing that impacts the board until turn 4. These are the kind of draws that Mono Black Aggro is able to capitalize on fairly easily.
I think a lot of the time this hand would be keepable given how the format was shaping up coming into this tournament, but after what happened last weekend in Providence, where we see some very low to the ground aggro decks, 2 mono black decks, and a mono red aggro deck making the top 8, this kind of hand not as keepable as it used to be.
Yep. Kyle's list seems informed by the Providence results to some extent. 2 copies of Ultimate Price in the main deck. Possible that he wanted to have a more reliable answer to Master of Waves in his main deck. This is a card that Jund Monsters struggles with periodically. Out of Abrupt Decay range, can't be killed by red removal, of course. It's basically just Palachronos, so possible Kyle expecting a little bit more Mono Blue Devotion this weekend. Tormented
Hero will be the follow-up for Shenhar, so he is on the ground running here to start round number 1. Looks like he drew another copy of Thoughtseize. He'll start by attacking for 4. Hutchens is going to go down to 14. We'll see what Shenhar does have as a follow-up. It looks to just be a Spiteful Return, passing the turn back, knowing that things are relatively safe here. As a Courser of Crufix is the draw, Hutchens is going to go down, it looks like, to 12, probably to deploy the 2-4.
Corsair Crufix, this was the draw Kyle needed this turn to have any chance to stay in the game. It's a very effective blocker, of course, and if it survives, can drag Kyle back into this game.
The big question, of course, is does Shenhar have a removal spell for the Courser to be able to continue to push through damage? We'll find out in just a moment as he draws a Swamp for the turn. You see, I believe, an Ultimate Price in his hand, so he's going to go reaching. I think we're going to start with a Thoughtseize, though. See what Kyle has picked up in the meantime. Shenhar will go down to 16. You'll see 2 Domris, the 2 Stormbreath Dragons, and a Dreadbore, so no new information here for Shenhar. He'll pick a card, and it will be the removal spell, as that's the most threatening of the bunch. There is a Swamp. That's an Ultimate Price. No cards left, but very efficient 3 turns here for Shenhar.
Absolutely. Shahar's removal suite in this main deck, 1 Hero's Downfall, 2 copies of Ultimate Price, 2 copies of Bioblight. Can't afford to play a bunch of creature removal in this list because you have to be threat dense, but Shahar with a couple slots dedicated to killing creatures.
So Hutchens is down to a very low 5 life already, and I don't know if there's anything he can do to work his way out of the situation. This is some of the appeal of Mono Black Aggro. We saw this at the Block Pro Tour Journey into Nyx. This was a very obvious deck, but it was still a very good one. It hasn't really picked up a lot of traction up until last weekend, and it looked pretty good there. Shenhar wins game number 1 over Jund Monsters.
And I think that's also a game that's pretty informative about Jund Monsters. The games where it's on the draw without a mana accelerant, it struggles to do anything quickly. Now, in some matchups that's palatable. Against control decks, you can start the game a little bit more slowly, but against a deck like Mono Black Aggro, you have to be playing something on the first couple turns of the game. Kyle couldn't do that and was run over pretty quickly.
Well, Hutchens is going to take a look at his sideboard. We'll do the exact same. You're going to see 2 copies of Rakdos' Return, 2 Putrefy, 4 Mistcutter Hydra, 2 Mizium Mortars, an additional Ultimate Price of Vraska the Unseen, a Chandra Pyromaster, and 2 copies of Golgari Charm, and that's the big one.
Golgari Charm is the best card in the format against Mono Black Aggro, in my opinion. It plays a ton of one-toughness creatures, and there's a lot of incidental enchantments in the deck as well. Threats like Herald of Torment and so forth. So Golgari Charm at its worst is a very efficient removal spell, and at its best can kill multiple of Shahar's creatures.
You mentioned one-toughness creatures being a thing that Mono Black does have. Makes Chandra Power Master look pretty good as well.
Yeah, Chandra, again, is a huge beating against Mono Black aggro. If Kyle can build up a board, if he can get some blockers into play, Chandra is capable of winning the game on its own.
High density removal spells, a couple copies of Museum Mortars, an additional ultimate price, and 2 more Putrefies. If Hutchens wants to go that route, can board out some of his slower cards, and I think just kind of move forward from there.
Yeah, I would get rid of Domri, for example. It's a little slow for this matchup. Kyle has no end of card advantage tools in his deck post-board with Golgari Charm, Palikronos, and so forth. So he doesn't need it to keep up in terms of raw cards. He just needs to be fast and efficient. And so removing cards like Domri for additional removal spells, I think, is the path to take.
Well, you've got the World Champions deck list in front of you. What's he have access to?
3 copies of Doomblade, 3 copies of Duress, 2 copies of Lifebane Zombie, 2 copies of Deathrite Shaman, 2 copies of Night Howler, and 3 copies of Dark Betrayal. I think you're going to want the 3 copies of Doomblade and the 2 Lifebane Zombies. I imagine this is a pretty straightforward sideboard against green creature decks. I don't think he's going to want to go to the Duress, even though he can reasonably assume Kyle is boarding in a lot more removal spells, including Golgari Charm. He can only afford to have so much of that stuff going on. He already has 4 Thoughtseize in his deck. So it's possible that he goes to Duress, but I believe it's unlikely.
We saw Jund Monsters a lot last week, and of course Chris Van Meter has been having a fantastic run with the deck. Over the past 2 weekends, however, Indianapolis and Providence, that deck has been everywhere, and it seems as though maybe people are making adjustments now. Mono Blue Devotion being the big one by Merriam, but also 2 Mono Black decks in the top 8, and heck, even a Mono Red deck too last weekend.
For sure, and the ultimate prices that Kyle's playing in his main deck also are much better against Jund Monsters than Abrupt Decay, capable of fighting over cards like Palikronos and Stormbreath Dragon.
Now, we do have a very large announcement for you guys, a couple of them over the course of the weekend, but the big ones being made after, and again, after round number 2 of coverage here. So make sure you are joining us then, as we have some very large announcements to make this weekend. It's been tough to stay tight-lipped, but I'm really excited about them.
Yeah, some additional, I can't go into too much detail, obviously. My producers are staring me down as we speak, but we have some cool stuff coming, and again, that's going to be at the end of round 2. After that match is over, we're going to be discussing some pretty big stuff.
We think you guys will be very excited about them. You can show your excitement at SCG Live, hashtag SCGINVI all weekend long. We've got our devices to be able to interact with you. It's going to be one heck of a tournament. We've got the world champion in attendance, Jerry Thompson, making his return, Brian Brundewin, Chris Van Meter, Todd Anderson, Brad Nelson, Ross Merriam, David Shields, Huey Jensen, Owen Turtenwald, Reed Duke. I know this is the largest invitational we've had with 435 players, but I feel like this is the one with the highest density of great players here as well.
A star-studded field. Yeah. It's going to be an awesome weekend.
Craig Krempels, good friend of yours from Jersey, drove down. I didn't expect to see him here this weekend.
I don't think he, because we have the Season 3 Invitational in New Jersey, I assumed that Craig was going to hold his invite and just go to that one instead, but he's got the fever and he'll be battling this weekend as well.
Gerard Fabiano, a good friend of yours as well, good friend of Craig too. He is here. Max Brown, who's won an Invitational last year in Vegas, he's in attendance. Just anyone that you can think of has pretty much made the drive out here in Columbus, which is a nice central hub of American Magic.
Easy drive, 6 or 7 hours, and plenty of stuff to do if the tournament doesn't go well between the Opens on Saturday and Sunday and the Origins Game Fair being here as well.
Absolutely. You can actually see behind Kyle Hutchens what you could have. AJ Soccer from Las Vegas, which is where he resides now. He took the flight over with Ruben Bressler. So we've got some great players in attendance, which means we're going to have some great matches this weekend. Hutchens going to take a look at his opening hand. You do see a Manic Accelerant, actually 2 of them this time, 2 copies of Elvish Mystic. Very, very important to this deck. I imagine he's going to keep his hand.
Sylvan Carrington as well. This is the type of hand that can play into a very fast overloaded Museum Mortars, which Mono Black really struggles with. And just any blocker is good. Kyle just needs to get stuff on the board. He can overpower Shahar fairly easily from that spot.
You saw Kyle consider playing an Overgrown Tomb untap to get a Elvish Mystic out on the table, but it doesn't look like he's really ramping in anything on time, so instead he's going to play the Temple, get his Scry on, and then move forward. You're going to see a Gnarled Scarhide here from Shenhar.
I like that sequence a lot from Kyle, just really valuing his life total in this matchup, taking some extra points of damage to get to the board faster. Not really worth it when you consider how important his life total is to him in this matchup.
The Sylvan Caryatid is going to come down on turn number 2 for Hutchens. He'll be passing the turn back. In comes the Gnarled Scarhide. Hutchens says, I'm going to block. I don't think there's much you can do to me. And the answer is he is correct. There's not too much that can happen. Just a Pain Seer is the follow-up here for Shenhar before passing the turn back over to Hutchens, who picks up a copy of Domri.
Basically, the only effect that Mono Black can have in that spot that's significant is Boon of Erebos. Shahar's not playing that in his list.
And you do see that from time to time as an Elvish Mystic is going to resolve here, but not a ton.
I play 4 of those bad boys in my list.
Well,
so.
you're your own man, that's for sure.
The black Rubble Belt Maka.
I don't even know what to say to that. Another Elvish Mystic, follow up with an Overgrown Tomb. Hutchens will pass the turn back. Mana, he's got plenty of that.
And a lot of powerful things to do. You see his hand, Domri, and of course that Mizium Mortar is the biggest thing.
And this is part of the problem with Pains here. You can see how it lines up on this board position, as well as just one toughness creatures in general. If Hutchens can get off to a start like this, which he did not do in game number 1, it looks like a much better matchup, as here comes Shenhar.
This is the spot where Painseer is noticeably worse than something like, Thrill Kill Assassin. Yep. Something else you can play in that spot.
So you see the Scarred will trade with the Mystic. Painseer will get blocked by the Caryatid. Inspired may happen next turn. We'll see what Hutchens has available to him. But you see Shenhar trying to figure out what else he wants to do on turn 3. Going to start by playing the best land in Standard. That'll be a Mutavault, followed up with a Lifebane Zombie. I don't know if Shahar's going to like what he sees, though. There's a Mizium Mortars, a Stormbreath Dragon, and a Domri, so not going to hit for once.
This is pretty rough. The Stormbreath Dragon's pretty powerful. Domri can find Kyle some cards, and if he's able to find a third red source of mana, that Mizium Mortars, that's the biggest thing going on in that hand.
Yeah, only 2 red mana right now, one from the Temple of Bannon, the other one from the Caryatid. Again, Shenhar going to miss with the Lifebane Zombie. He does have the information so he can figure out how to move forward, and you can actually see Shenhar's hand right now. He has a Thoughtseize and a Doomblade, so he's going to have to work his way through these things that Hutchens does have, and he's going to add another copy of Mizium Mortars to the grip.
I was about to say, if Shahar gets out of this turn okay, he can Doomblade a theoretical Stormbreath Dragon, Thoughtseize the Mizium Mortars out of Kyle's hand, and be in really good shape. But that's no longer an option now with Kyle picking up the second Mortars.
You wonder where Kyle's going to fire off this Mortars. Will he take out the Painseer or the Lifebane Zombie? He says, I do want to take out the Painseer. No extra cards for you. He can follow this up with a Domri if he'd like. He could have a little fight action between the Elvish Mystic and the Lifebane Zombie, but then he exposes his Domri to attack from Mutavault.
And there's no guarantee he can cast the Stormbreath Dragon in his hand the following turn. He can also play Domri and plus it, but again, he just loses it to Lifebane Zombie plus Mutavault, so.
You see, decisions here for the Gen Monsters player. A little unsure of himself. What he wants to do is Hutchens. Looks like it might be time for that Planeswalker. But again, very unsure of himself on how he wants to navigate the next couple turns of this game.
And this is part of the reason I'm not a huge fan of Domri in the matchup. Between Lifebane Zombie, Mogus' Marauder, and such, Shahar's pretty well equipped to attack Domri, even if Kyle builds up a board.
Kyle's looking for an extra card. He's going to take a look at the top, and he will find one in a copy of Pulachronos before passing the turn back. Now, of course, if Hutchens wants to, if Shenhar wants to take down that Domri, he'll have to fire from Mutavault to do so. So we'll see if Hutchens is happy with that exchange, because he has, of course, made his Domri very vulnerable now.
I think it's one of those things where if he hits that turn, this is a reasonable exchange. It's most of Shahar's turn. He saves some damage. If Kyle misses there, it's pretty bad.
Shenhar says, I'm going to lead off with a Thoughtseize. I know the cards in your hand. Well, at least I did. I didn't know you had another Mizium Mortars, but now you do. So Shenhar has to play around that appropriate now as well. He might even consider taking that card, since he does have at least one Doomblade, and you have to imagine there are more coming from his deck.
Yeah, the big question is, if Shahar is able to ignore the Mizium Mortars, and there's a sequence here where if he finds a 2-toughness creature and a Herald of Torment, let's say, he cares about the Mizium Mortars much less because he can make a 5-toughness creature. Until that happens, it really contorts everything that Shahar has to do.
It looks like he says, all right, I am going to take care of Mizium Mortars. I feel as though I'll be able to beat that Dragon at Pulachronos. I've already got one Doomblade. Not sure if he has another removal spell just yet, but he's going to fire at Mutavault, get rid of Domri, going to play a Swamp, and simply pass the turn back, knowing that there's not a ton that can happen this turn to him, as Hutchens will take a draw. It's another copy of Stormbreath Dragon.
Shahar might feel he's in a position to race just a chain of creatures, and he also decided in Doomblades, you see one in his hand alongside his ultimate prices, so he has a lot of draws against this kind of stuff as well.
Pulachronos going to join the party here. A little bit of interesting tapping there. Could have tapped the Caryatid and then attacked for one with the Elvish Mystic. Opted not to go that route.
It seems just like a free point of damage, but probably not a huge deal here.
So let's see what the world champion does want to do. Again, we know about the Doomblade. You see the Mutavault among the lands. Lifebane Zombie already in play. Looks like he's got some other options at his disposal. Looks like there might be a Spiteful Return hanging out over there. Again, you said he might be interested in a racing situation. We'll see.
Now that he knows about the Stormbreath Dragon in hand, spending the entire turn bestowing is a little bit dangerous because Kyle can just play Stormbreath and hit back for a ton of damage. So Shahar has to figure out how he wants to navigate this damage race. He can, for example, play Herald of Torment and Doomblade something, but then does he have the ability to get through the Stormbreath Dragon the following turn?
That's the big question.
One of the reasons I like mono black aggro is there's a lot of reach, especially compared to a deck like mono red aggro.
Oh, yeah.
Herald of Torment is just great to cast on curve and is incredible at swinging damage races. Also gives mono black the tools to beat a card like Elspeth, for example, that mono red really struggles with.
Well, we're going to the air. It's a Herald of Torment bestowed. In for 6 we go. Hutchens is going to go down to 14, and you can tell right now, Shenhar has a heavy interest in racing, as Hutchens will take a draw. It's a stomping ground.
His hand may not allow him to do very much else, is another factor in all of this.
This is 5 mana. That is a dragon. You have to imagine both these creatures coming to their own hand. They are. Shenhar is going to go down to 9 before passing the turn back. Takes a draw. Again, we see the Doomblade of the Painseer there as well.
So Shahar might be in a position where he needs to use a removal spell on the Stormbreath Dragon, commit to chump blocking the Palachronos for as long as he can, and try to barely squeeze out the damage race with his Lifebane Zombie and potentially, additional bestows down the line.
Now, we talked about when Hutchens played that copy of Palachronos, how he opted to keep up his Sylvan Caryatid instead of getting that 1 point of damage to the Elvish Mystic. You wonder if that comes back to hurt him in this situation.
It's possible that Kyle on that turn was playing around a removal spell for Palachronos and getting hit with the Mutavault. So, and you can see Kyle's at 14. If he takes an extra 2 points of damage, this is now a 2-turn clock instead of 3. So it wasn't a total miss there. There's a reason for him to leave up his Caryatid, but the way the game is breaking, it's not clear what he would have been better served doing.
Spiteful Return is going to come hang out on defense after the attack. You see the life totals are even right now. We can't forget about those damage that Shenhar will take on his upkeep from Herald of Torment. That certainly matters and weighs into the equation here as well. You saw Hutchens draw another land. Does he want to play this untapped so he can tap out for a dragon? He also has the ability to go monstrous with either one of his creatures now that he has another land, but we know about the Doomblade hanging out. And if you're Hutchens, I think you have to imagine, all right, you probably have a removal spell over there.
Yeah, it's tough. If he commits all of his resources to any one creature, whether it's casting the Stormbreath in his hand or going monstrous with either one of his creatures, a removal spell is really bad for Kyle here. So he's trying to probably find some way to do 2 productive things this turn with his mana, so he's less leveraged against a removal spell, but his hand really doesn't let him do that. He only has things that cost 5 mana, whether it's casting the Stormbreath Dragon, fighting with Palachronos, or going monstrous. All of these commit essentially his entire turn.
So what do you do here if you're Kyle? Can you see through the removal spell? What can you do to play around the removal spell if you know that it's there? Can you beat this problematic Lifebane Zombie that has a Herald of Torment on it? It's a rough road ahead. Also, you see Shenhar does have the Mutavault back on defense as well. There's definitely a lot of blocking to be done here by Shahar.
Keep in mind that Kyle can present a lethal attack too, just with what he has in play. He could theoretically start off the turn by just attacking with Palachronos and Stormbreath Dragon and seeing how Shahar responds.
Oh, it looks like there's going to be a monstrosity activation here from Hutchens with the Palachronos to try to clear out this Spiteful Return.
And if he does this, then he loses to the removal spell. The Doomblade kills the Palachronos in response. Kyle can't produce a lethal attack and dies on the way back to the Lifebane Zombie plus the Spiteful Return trigger.
Yeah, the one neat thing about Spiteful Return is that when it attacks, that's when you lose the 2. It doesn't have to get through, doesn't have to go unblocked, it doesn't have to deal damage to the opponents. That's what kind of makes it an appealing card. And it's a very, very fast clock is the Enchantment Creature Zombie. One of the better cards in this deck. Again, this deck has a lot of options as far as 2-drops are concerned. Shenhar decides, okay, that's fine. I'll lose that, still with the Doomblade at the ready, still with the ability to activate Mutavault to block and then Doomblade something as well. So you imagine he had to have weighed this into his equation.
Shahar has to play around stuff here as well. If he just Doomblades and taps out, then he loses to something like Domri. I guess not Domri because he has Mutavault available, but another removal spell potentially complicates things.
Hutchens trying to figure out how can I attack? Is there anything else that I can do differently here? Again, he's looking at Stormbreath Dragon in a land. He can't cast the Stormbreath Dragon, of course. He's got access to 3 mana right now. The Stomping Grounds would be the 4th. So I think right now his decision is, what am I supposed to attack with? Again, because the thing here is the Lifebane Zombie, due to Intimidate, he can't block it. So Stormbreath Dragon is almost priced into attacking at that point. Now the question is, do I leave Pulachronos back on defense, or is my Sylvan Caryatid going to be enough?
I'm a little surprised about this play from Shahar, because if he wanted to do this and not Doomblade in response to a fight, I don't know why he wouldn't have just played the Painseer, which is more mana to fight with Pulachronos and saves his Spiteful Return as something to potentially bestow onto the Lifebane zombie next turn. As it stands, he's sort of lethal on the way back. He only has 6 points of damage. The Mutavault can't get through. He has no additional bestow creatures in his hand.
Well, the one thing that Shenhar may have been doing is playing around a removal spell potentially.
Yes.
As here is a Mutavault. We do know that Jund Monsters has access to quite a few of them. So a Mutavault's going to get in front of Pulachronos. Stomping Ground's going to come in and play tapped. Pass the turn back. Shenhar's going to go down to 7. He will take a draw. It's a copy of Rakdos Cackler.
Cackler is still fine here. It's another chump blocker.
I guess you can't put a leash on that thing. You don't see that too often.
Yeah. Leashed.
Yeah, it doesn't happen too much. But as you mentioned, yeah, if he had played Painseer that turn, we're looking at a much different game, and maybe Shenhar perhaps realized his mistake. He's going to come in for 6 points of damage here. Hutchens is going to go down to 2.
I'm sure Shahar has his logic for this.
Yeah,
but,
and see,
you know,
that's why I think Hutchens didn't attack with Stormbreath Dragons. I think he thought he could block, but absolutely not intimidate. Don't even think about it. And the interesting thing here is that Hutchens may not be punished for his mistake. We'll see. As the Painseer is going to come into play, Hutchens is going to untap and take a draw. Shenhar still does have access to that Doomblade. Here's another copy of Stormbreath Dragon. Here come the very large creatures. You see, he's going to put that in front of Pulachronos. He's going to fire off a Doomblade there. And that's going to kill that. Painseer is going to die. 4 damage is going to come across. So down to 3 go. And now this is an ultimate price, I believe, on the Lifebane zombie. Is that what he's showing him?
if Kyle casts this right now, he...
Now, there's not too sure about the timing on this. He shows him that, and yeah, as you were going to say it, if he shows him that right now, that's a problem.
Yeah, because the Herald comes down and attacks. Kyle may say, I'm doing this inside of combat.
Yeah.
And then, you know, Shahar loses the game.
Explain the timing on that for people who don't know about Herald, Torment, and Bestow and all that stuff.
So this is another wrinkle about Bestow. When you bestow a creature onto another creature, that bestow creature is counted as being in play. So if you know, on your opponent's turn before they attack, let's say, you destroyed the original creature. If that bestow creature's been in play since the start of last turn, it's a creature with haste, effectively.
Mm-hmm.
So what Kyle can do in that spot is wait until Shahar is attacking, kill the Lifebane zombie inside of combat. The Herald of Torment comes into play untapped, and it can't attack, obviously, because we're already past that. We're in the attack step. But if Kyle plays it on Shahar's turn before Shahar attacks, it is a creature that can attack. I learned that interaction once the very hard way on Magic Online.
It only takes once.
Yeah, you learn it once.
Yeah. If you are just joining us, everybody at home, we do appreciate it. It's going to be a long weekend, so we hope you can tune in all weekend long. Cedric Phillips, Patrick Sullivan, Matthias Hunt as well, along with Andrew Shrout, Nick Miller, and the rest of the Star City Games live crew. We are at our Season 2 Invitational here in Columbus at the Origins Game Fair. At SCG Live, hashtag SCGINVI for your tweets all weekend long. A very large announcement will be made after round 2, so we hope you guys can join us for that. Again, that will be after round 2, after we do watch our matches there. Of course, we have a Standard Open that we're going to play this weekend beginning tomorrow, a Legacy Open that we'll be doing on Sunday. We've got a lot of Magic to cover this weekend.
And with a lot of quality players, of course, the Invitational's always going to be a competitive field. Some of these high-quality players will likely not make the second day, because that's just kind of how Magic works. Mm-hmm. So we're going to have a lot of awesome players also in the Opens the entire weekend as well.
And we got one quality player sitting down the sideboard right now with Nick Miller, Jerry Thompson. His return to competitive Magic. He is doing battle this weekend. It's going to be fun to watch that.
Yeah.
It's 6 Invitational top 8s, 2 wins.
It's been too long. It's been too long since we've had Jerry back.
Like, that sabbatical at Wizards, we knew that couldn't last.
Yeah.
That guy likes to play Magic. Who are we kidding? Both players are going to take a look at their 7 cards here. Shenhar will be on the play. He had a very dominating game 1. Game 2, there was some more interaction. He got to a slow start. Good draw from Hutchens as well. You see Shenhar's going to take a mulligan here. Probably wouldn't keep if he could have all 12 of those cards. Hutchens going to take a look at his opener. You see a couple of lands over there, also an Elvish Mystic. I think that might be the big one. Also 2 copies of Golgari Charm, but no black mana yet.
And this is an element of Jund Monsters. You're missing a colored mana or an accelerant pretty often. So not all of your hands are going to be completely lined up, but that hand far too good to mulligan. A lot of upside, a mana accelerant, and of course the 2 copies of Golgari Charm. If Kyle's able to find black mana, Shahar will be hard-pressed to win this game.
lot of people already tuning in at home. Taya Steele rooting on Josh Ravitz, of course.
Yep.
I know Taya, of course, lives in the Seattle area, top 8 at Invitational in Las Vegas last year at the back end. So we'll see if Ravitz is able to do that as well. They're looking for one more large trophy. They've got some smaller trophies. They need a parental figure, Taya says. So we'll see if that ends up happening.
A guardian trophy.
As it were. The world champ on a mulligan down to 6 here. We'll see what he can cobble together from Mono Black Aggro deck that was placed on the scene due to Providence last weekend. 2 of those in the top 8, kind of out of nowhere.
Well, I mean, it's a deck that's gotten a lot of buzz over the last couple of weeks. A lot of that has to do with the Block Pro Tour. But it's been kind of hanging around for a bit. It was even a deck that people were playing a little bit before Journey Nix came out. You know, I know at one of the invitationals I saw Greg Hatch playing Mono Black in one of the opens at least.
Yeah. Invitational finalist in Las Vegas last year. He's here this weekend as well. Everybody coming out to play. Shenhar just going to pass on turn 1. That's pretty telling. A deck with so many 1-drops and even access to Thoughtseize having nothing to do on the first turn of the game. You got to hope for him that his hand is strong beyond that.
Now, in fairness, at least, you know, the philosophy that I have with Mono Black Aggro against Gem Monsters, I'm cutting out a lot of the 1-drops post-board.
Okay.
Because they increase your exposure to Golgari Charm, the hardest card for you to fight. And there's just so many Sylvan Caryatid, you know, 4/4 type creatures hanging around that your 2/1s don't do a ton. So it's possible Shahar has just removed certain cards from his deck to make room for more removal.
Maybe content playing a longer game as a Mutavault will be the play for Shenhar before passing the turn back. Hutchens with a copy of Elvish Mystic. Over to Shenhar we go. Not sure who picked up that turn. Looks like a copy of Spiteful Return. You see a Herald of Torment in his hand as well. Will he deploy the 3/3 or maybe save that for later? We will find out in just a moment.
Herald of Torment's very solid card against Kyle's deck. You know, he does have Golgari Charm, a couple of removal spells for it, but Jump Monsters is a little soft in the air, not that many ways to block flyers, so I think that I like getting the Herald of Torment online and then start curving out.
Hey, no black mana for the opponent just yet, but here's a Mogus Marauder. The trigger will give that Intimidate along with Haste, and in for 2 we go. Hutchens going to go down to 18. Hutchens will take a draw. It's a Stormbreath Dragon. You will notice, again, no black mana just yet. This is a Corsive Crewfix. Let's see if that can help. Top card is a Dreadbore. That's a land. Hutchens will go up to 19 from that Stomping Ground, the Courser trigger, but no black mana yet. And if you're Shenhar, you of course notice that, and you're trying to pounce before you can find it.
Now, the reason that Shahar did this last turn is it sets up a really nice bestow curve. He can play Spiteful Returned on his Marauder this turn, get in for 2 points of damage. The following turn, put Herald of Torment on it, and now we're talking a lot of damage.
This is going to be a Life-Bane Zombie instead, so Shenhar wants to see, all right, what's going on over there? Do you actually not have black mana? And the answer is yes. Now, we're going to see Life-Bane Zombie miss again, which is rather strange, but a Stormbreath Dragon, 2 copies of Golgari Charm, and 2 copies of Ultimate Price in the hand.
This is pretty dangerous for Kyle here. If he doesn't find black mana next turn, Shahar gets to bestow onto the Life-Bane Zombie, and suddenly Golgari Charm loses a lot of its effectiveness.
Dreadbore added to the grip. Overgrown Tomb has been found. Black mana is here.
Huge for Kyle. He's still in a bit of a bottleneck. He is in 1 spell per turn territory for the foreseeable future, either casting a removal spell or casting a Stormbreath Dragon, but finding black mana this turn is a big deal.
Well, Hutchens is going to put that land into play, deciding if he wants to put it untapped or tapped. I have to imagine it's going to be untapped. He's got a lot of black spells to cast, and he will do that. He'll take 2 from the Overgrown Tomb coming into play, but he'll gain 1 from the Courser, of course. Top card of his deck does need to be revealed here in just a moment, as a Dreadbore will be fired off, and that top card is an Elvish Mystic. Lifebane Zombie bites the dust. Shenhar will take a draw, but he knows he's in a world of hurt now because his opponent found the black mana for those spells.
Now, and he's got just a chain of removal spells coming. He's still in 1 spell per turn territory, so Shahar can try to play some sort of tempo game, but that's going to be very hard against an opponent who's gaining life already at 18.
And not a very quick start for Shenhar this game either. The mulligan looks like it may have been detrimental. Does have some good cards, but I think you got to, knock the door down when you're playing against Shun monsters. Now there is a Herald of Torment that will be bestowed on Mogus Marauder. So in for 5 in the air will come the Marauder. Hutchens is going to go down to 13. But again, we know that Hutchens does have answers to that card in those 2 Golgari Charms. He's going to draw a copy of Elvish Mystic. The top card here now is Scavenging Ooze.
Scavenging Ooze is an important draw for Kyle the following turn because it allows him to do multiple things in the turn, which is the biggest problem right now. He can cast his Elvish Mystic and a removal spell this turn. Next turn, play Scavenging Ooze and a removal spell and really start to push forward in his game plan.
Just an Elvish Mystic, no attacks here. 1 damage will be dealt to Shenhar from the Herald of Torment trigger. He will take a draw here. Looks like he may have picked up another copy of Lifebane Zombie. Now, of course, Shenhar has to probably imagine that, okay, my Herald of Torment's going to die this turn to Golgari Charm. So how do I proceed forward is the question.
Well, he can open up with the Thoughtseize now and try to force some sort of action.
Lifebane Zombie probably looks pretty appealing as well, but he does know most of the contents over there in Hutchens' hand, as well as the top of the deck. So he's working with some pretty good information.
And it's really tough now because that Scavenging Ooze is coming too.
That'll really gum things up, that's for sure. And Hutchens' life total isn't low enough at this point, only at 13.
And what you're saying right now is part of the reason I'm not a huge fan of Thoughtseize in this matchup. When you're playing against a deck like Esper or Mono Black Devotion, where you can ignore portions of your opponent's hand, Thoughtseize is incredibly powerful because they have 1 or 2 cards you care about, and the information is super valuable to you as well. With decks like Mono Black Aggro, you care about literally every card your opponent has. Every creature trades with something that you do. Every removal spell, you know, matters, of course. And so it's harder for you to open up a path with your discard spells. And it just leads to the game going on longer, which is favorable usually for your opponent who has more powerful stuff in their deck.
Here is a Thoughtseize. You're going to see the 2 ultimate price, the other copy of Golgari Charm, and then a Stormbreath Dragon. A Golgari Charm was fired off in response to this Thoughtseize to take care of the Herald of Torment. So a decision here for Shenhar in just a moment on what card to take, and if he can slog through all this removal as well as that Scavenging Ooze on top of the deck, he's going to go with Stormbreath Dragon as the card to take. And again, we know that Shenhar does have a copy of Spiteful Return. He could go Bestowing here if he'd like. We'll see if that's the option that he takes.
Well, Bestowing here means that Kyle just gets to block with his Courser if he's feeling so inclined, and a Mana Elf, trade Elf for Mogus Marauder, put another creature, 2 more creatures in the graveyard for the Scavenging Ooze. So I think Shahar just needs to pump the brakes, build up his board a little bit, and try to win the game ultimately with another Mogus' Marauder.
Temple of Malice is going to come in here. Going to gain a life from the Courser up to 14. Take a look at a Putrefy on the top of the deck, and Hutchens will decide if he wants to keep that. It looks like the answer is a resounding yes. More removal seems pretty good right now. Scavenging Ooze is going to hit the table here as well. Couple of creatures in the graveyard. You saw Stormbreath Dragon get taken via Thoughtseize, so that's down there. There's a Herald of Torment and a Lifebane Zombie as well, so that Ooze could become a 5/5 very, very quickly as Shenhar will draw a card. It's just a swamp to go along with that Spiteful Return.
I imagine this turn Kyle's going to use some sort of removal spell to kill the Lifebane Zombie, which is the only thing that he can't contain with his blockers, and then just start taking this game over with Scavenging Ooze.
And it looks like Hutchens is going to be able to turn the corner here and actually start attacking, something he has not done yet. Taking a rather conservative approach, as here is a Lifebane Zombie that will be suited up with Spiteful Return, but Ultimate Price in response will take care of that. Shenhar is just going to play his last card. It's a Swamp to be able to activate Mutavault. A couple Ooze activations are going to take care of those creatures. Hutchens is going to make a 4/4, but more importantly, he's going to gain some life, go up to 16. Keep a very high life total here. And it looks like Shenhar is going to have a real tough time getting back from this one because of all the removal.
Once the Jund Monsters deck starts deploying 3 toughness creatures, which is very hard for a deck of all 2/2s to attack through, it basically comes down to how much removal can you generate, and can you get their life total low such that Mogus' Marauder or Herald of Torment can potentially finish them off. Shahar is nowhere near either of those scenarios, and so it's hard to come back from spots like this.
Scavenging Ooze is going to come into the red zone here. You see Hutchens rearranging his mana, maybe considering killing a creature to be able to grow the Ooze, or just growing it now anyway. You see now, right now he's tapping some mana. He says, I'm going to take care of that Lifebane Zombie and my Stormbreath Dragon. I'm going to turn my Ooze into a 6/6, get 6 points of damage across, and have removal at the ready.
There's no big rush for Kyle to do anything. Arguably, he could have sent in his Corsair Crewfix that turn, which is awkward for Shahar to block because Kyle has so many removal spells in his hand, but he doesn't have to go firing off these removal spells on anything Shahar has in play. He can just keep these as insurance policies. In fact, using Golgari Charm potentially as a regenerator against an Ultimate Price or Doomblade off the top from Shahar is a better use than killing any of Shahar's creatures.
And that is an extension of the hand. Kyle Hutchens is going to win this match over Shahar Shenhar. 2-1. Jund Monsters taking down Mono Black Aggro.
Game 1 is really solid for Mono